Hey everybody, welcome to Oregon State University's Permaculture Design Pro. This is the office hours for the summer and fall class, and this is our fourth office hour. So we're moving from week 3 into week 4. We've got some great questions today, really looking forward to going over them, and we'll have a chance to go over the upcoming assignments as well. So looking forward to that. And it looks like somebody deleted the August 8th header, so I'm just going to put that back in. There we go. Awesome. So as we're getting started, I just want everyone to jump into the chat bar and little question, how's the class going? How's the content, assignments, generally getting a sense of how the experience is moving for you currently. I'll bring up the questions as you guys are taking a moment just to update me on how the class is going. And if you want to, instead of writing, just want to speak it, that's totally fine as well. For me, because this is a me, we, you conversation. Course for me is going really well. It's been great to see the level of conversation coming from everyone. Really, really well put together assignments. I feel like this class in particular is striving perhaps a little more fastidiously than perhaps other classes have. It's been great to see all those conversations, and the assignments have been great. I've been really appreciative of everyone's specificity within the conversation. That's been phenomenal. Nice to see the assignments grow from class to class. This is, I think, 6th or 7th offering with the template. This is one of our next iterations, which is really fun. Nika has weighed in, great pace, enjoying the different steps in the assignment to account for all details and information need to come up with a great design. Thanks, Nikas. I appreciate it. Yeah, one of the things that's really interesting about this course is when I designed the template, I did it in such a way that I wanted to have all the information that I've been collecting over the years and put everything into one place. So that way, for you folks who are starting now, you don't have to start, 10, 12 years ago where I started. And then you get to build upon that. And so I'm sure as you build the next conversation off of this course, you'll just be further advanced. Anybody else want to chime in, either unmute or throw into the chat? Yeah. Adam's chiming in. Bryn, great. Good to get the wheels turning on analysis and put things on paper that often only happened in my head. A bit behind the coursework. Pacing is good for the course. I just need to sort out how to dedicate my time more regularly. Great piece. Yeah. Taking what's in the head and putting it on paper is useful. Adam and I just had a great conversation all about his work in Google SketchUp. And what's fascinating is everybody comes to this course in a different space and what they've done and how they've applied themselves. And you can take those skills pretty much across landscape design and you can apply them really phenomenally into whatever it is you're doing. This is from Larry Santoyo. You don't do permaculture, you use permaculture in what you do. Most of us here are looking at design and design-based businesses, but for the vast majority, you can bring in skills and tools, and that can actually define your point of view and your niche in this world. We have some Americans, so I'll say niche, but that aspect brings out that conversation. Quick question from Karen. I'm not sure I understand the microclimates. Yeah, we'll get to that assignment, Karen, no problems. Great. Anybody else want to chime in on how the course has been going or any commentary, the good, the bad, the ugly, even if there's frustrations? This is a course made by people and people made mistakes. So I've had everything from people feeling like the mistakes were so egregious that they decided not to be in the course anymore because how dare a university make a mistake? And I've had people go, it's fine. It's all good. It's just life. So any commentary on that would be great as well. And if there's nothing, we'll probably just squeak right into this next conversation. So there's a couple of announcements I wanted to make. So I'm just going to put them at the top of our Q&A list here. The first one is Jamie Wallace and I. Jamie's an incredible award-winning landscape designer. Started with ornamentals, got into ecology, and now he's this powerhouse of beauty and functionality. We're looking at developing a number of ecological landscape business workshops. These would be one-offs. These would be conversations about, if you take a look at the pre-launch list here, I'll actually share my screen. If you take a look at the pre-launch list, this is everything from what kind of business should I create? What am I eligible to create? How do I get clients, intake clients? How do I know if clients are a good fit? How do I know to charge and raise prices, develop contracts with clients, estimated design, basically from beginning to end, but they would be one-off workshops that we'd be thinking of putting together. So if that is of interest to you, if you go to our Q&A page under August 8th, announcements, we've got that pre-launch list there. The other thing I wanted to let everybody know about, really excited about this, a good colleague and friend of mine, Gord Baird, we're going to be putting together a water series workshops. So it'll start in October with composting toilets, and this includes all types of composting toilets. So Gord is the author of The Essential Composting Toilets from Waste Stream to Mainstream. Brilliant book, wonderful book to have on the bookshelf. It's right behind me here. And we're going to be going into an 8-session series, all about composting toilets, design, evaluation, effluent streams. This can be used for a designer, a builder, a regulator. Quite commonly, Gord will have a number of regulators in his courses because he works at a regulatory level. He helped to support the supporting documentation that became the building code for composting gray water ready in British Columbia, which is the first region in the world to have composting toilets and gray water ready legislation built into the building code. So when we talk about learning from people who've been there before, this is an incredible opportunity. Everybody who's on the wait list or pre-launch list, currently 44, will have an opportunity to access the course at the lowest possible price and a couple of perks. It'll start in October, go into November. And then we'll be getting into gray water in January and then rainwater in February. Now, there's lots of books out there. There's lots of folks that are talking about these different elements, but this is what Gord does every single day. He designs and builds composting toilets, gray water systems, and rainwater systems, plus filtration systems for small and medium water communities. So sometimes he's working with small villages, sometimes he's working with remote islands, but his level of detail and design is incredible. And if you don't know about Gord, highly recommend you check out eco-sense.ca. Him and his partner, Ann Baird, created the first two-story cob load-bearing building in North America that was engineered for seismic. It's one of the most brilliant, beautiful homes. There's lots of tours on YouTube that you can take a look at, but I've been a colleague and friend of Gord's for years and just so pleased that we get a chance to build this course together. So I'm just going to quickly grab the link here, and I'm going to put it in here as well. So composting toilets course pre-launch. Fantastic. All right. So I just want to check back in on a few logistics. So when we put questions into the question doc, I'm just going to pop back up to the example at the top here. What I need from you is your first and last name, where you're from, and then link to your project. So I don't know who asked this question, but thank you for it. And if you're on here and you want to put it in, that'd be great. In our online slides document, I provided links for more info. When giving this out as a printed package to a client or for a proposal, would it be best to print all the extra info and make appendices? So it's a great question, and it depends. So for my feasibility studies resulting in a deliverable of a concept plan and landscape manual, I provide full appendices of all pertinent information. So this could include, as we're getting into the local plant survey, that's about assignment week 6, 7. Most places in North America, this is not true for the world, but most places in North America have an ecological community that has been determined for an area. And this will include climax flora and climax fauna. These are the plants, the animals that when this system becomes to its full expression, these are the animals you see. And when we're designing, understanding that blueprint is really important. So when I find those lists and I find those ecological communities, I will print them out, or I will have a digital copy available for my clients. So that way they have that blueprint of what they're working in. And this is another way of designing. So if we find that there's quercus, if we find that there's prunus, if we find that there's ribes in this community, well, then we know that there might be an undesirable edible native ribes, but we can introduce an edible choice select ribes, and we know that that type of vegetation will thrive in that area. So this is really that blueprint. So I tend to give that completely to my clients, and this is probably why I think I've shown you this before. This is why feasibility studies can be an inch and a half thick, because there's a huge amount of information in them. That said, most people are digitally inclined these days, and the clients I'm working with right now, we're developing an entire digital repository, and I doubt we will print. So my work is also evolving. So we've got a full Google document with all of my headings. I use the keyline scale of permanence for all things agricultural, but I use the Regrarians update. So that's climate, geography, water, access, ecosystems. If you don't follow Darren Doherty and the Regrarians, highly recommend you do if you go into this work full time. The Regrarians have the most active designer producer workplace on the internet, and it's specific to people who are designers. But with that, I'm pairing a Google Earth Pro overlay, a full data deck that I then pass on to my clients, because I'm training my clients to use Google Earth Pro because it is so user friendly and it's a way that they can design with me. And that's more to my specificity of the clients I like to work with. If you're working in urban landscapes, you're going to be under the auspices of every other landscaper. They're going to want a plan. They're going to want, like, there's an expectation. But when you're working with more ecologically focused folks, or more folks that are open to the change that I think those of us in this class think we need, they're open to a little bit of difference. So this has really been inspired by my late friend and colleague, Dan Palmer. And he pioneered the living design process, this idea of, I'm going to work with a client as they are developing their site throughout the entire process. There's never going to be a complete design that you give the client. There's never a final design. And we know that. I've spoken about this at length. No designs are final when we're working with ecology. They're always changing. They're always evolving. Hardscapes can be pretty permanent, but when we get to vegetation and water, those tend to change and evolve over time. Great question. Really appreciate that. If this person is here, and if they have any other questions about this, just let me know if they have any follow-up questions. Just going to check. I see that we've got some notifications on the chat. A few more points. Adam, is the hope that this workshop will be available again annually, or truly a one-off? Yeah, so the courses that I'm developing through Regenerative Living are all one-time live, and then they're recorded for perennial access. And then either this year or next year, that site will go to a membership model. I think we're at 10 or 12 courses at this point, and I've got another 8 on the go. We've got Grazing with Goats for Vegetative Management with Jeanette Hall coming up. She runs Bad Plant Management, great pun, out of Alberta. So if you're ever looking at working with goats and mobstock grazing and you want somebody who's doing it professionally and has to perform every single day, that'll be phenomenal. We have a course coming up with Mark Krawczyk, who just developed this tomb, Coppice Agroforestry, tiny book, very small. Phenomenal book for anybody who's working in agroforestry, coppice forestry. Coppice agroforestry can be thought of as the pole wood economy, that is growing wood to a certain size diameter and then using it for that diameter set. Phenomenal. And before oil, gas, petroleum products, pole wood economy was one of the economies that kept us alive. There's a wonderful book I'm just about to read called The Age of Wood that goes into the conversation about wood and how it's transformed our conversation. But we've got that one coming up. We have potentially a course with Mark Lakeman about permaculture and working with urban officials. He's the brilliant lead of communitecture out of Portland, Oregon, as well as city repair and intersection repair and the village building convergence. Phenomenal human. Anyways, there's a lot of courses that are coming up over the next year. So yeah, there's always the opportunity to join the course live if you want that live experience and want to have your questions answered. And then afterwards, the course is available as a self-paced course. Thanks so much, Adam. Peg City Yoga, that was me. Okay, awesome. We're after all three questions. I got you, Noah. Thanks so much. Good deal. Okay. So Noah, any further follow-ups for this question? Or is that good?
No, that's pretty good. Thank you. All of them were pretty good. The last one I went back to a race, but you had already answered it because I went into the template. I just had asked questions from the book, but yeah, I'm good. Thank you.
Oh, awesome. Thank you. Great.
Yeah.
When going through this with a client proposal, would we create the tables that identify a single plant for each microclimate, or was it more of a benefit to start researching plants? Yeah, so this is the interesting thing about this class is both an introduction to permaculture, but also directed at people who want to be designers. So this was more so getting a sense of, from a total beginners, identifying a plant, going through that process, understanding, and then starting to make the relationship between, oh, interesting, I'm seeing these plants in these microclimates. And there's a story told to me by a friend, Mark Tobin, who was one of the operational directors or managing directors, or he worked at Lost Valley Educational Center down in Oregon years ago. And he witnessed when David Holmgren, co-creator of permaculture, tropics, Australian-based, came to Oregon, Pacific Northwest, temperate, cool climate. And he and I just had his name in my head, ran the bamboo nursery down there years ago. Wonderful mentor of mine. Basically, they walked through the entire landscape, and David, while not knowing the plants, decoded the entire landscape by looking at the plants, looking at their microclimate, and looking at their shape and their function within the landscape. It was one of the most inspiring things I'd ever been told, because once you start to look at plants and understand their functionality and understand how they operate and how they work, it is possible to decode a landscape like some polyglots can decode a language by understanding inflections, intonations, syllables, linguistics, all of this piece that you can start to decode it. So this is a beginning. For clients, what I'll do is I'll usually provide a vegetation list if it's in a region I understand and know. But it's not, I'll hire a biologist, a conservationist, or a naturalist to help me develop that list. Or I'll pick up a local ID book with a dichotomist key. Now, a dichotomist key is a way of asking simple questions about the plant you see and then dividing into further and further and further areas of specificity. So you can usually identify off of a die key, although most of us want to grab an app, take a photo, and have the answer for us immediately. But the die key is brilliant if you actually want to learn plant anatomy and also evolution, because a lot of that identification comes back to evolution. Great question. When doing the zones, are we indicating what they currently are, or what they are and what we are starting to envision? Just what they are. So this is long, thoughtful, protracted thought, looking at the site. This is a site you've never been to and has never been touched. It might be a zone 5 across, or it may be a zone 4 or zone 3. That's totally fine. Years ago, when I was working with Ron Barazan, the urban farmer, we would take a group of anywhere from like 15 to 25 foreign students down to Cuba. He had been a longtime friend of Cuba. He had a permanent residence. He spoke Spanish fluently. And so we would have this 21-day revolving PDC that would start in Veredado, go to Sanctus Spiritus, end up in Santiago de Cuba. And when we would end up in Santiago de Cuba, we would have about a 7 to 8 day design and installation conversation where we would actively design and install. And Nydia's place was phenomenal because out her back door, she had this grove of bananas, but bananas don't need a whole lot of attention. They're a herb. They're easy to cut down. They're easy to transplant the corm or the root ball. And so one of the main iterations of that design was taking a look at the zonation, looking that the veggie garden was far away from the house. And the decision was to move the veggie garden and the banana grove and basically swap them. So this first iteration or observation of zones is an opportunity just to see the site as it is and to ask the question of, with the client interview, with the design criteria, with the brief, is this the best assemblage of all these parts? Does this work best for the movement of the site? We like to say that the best fertility of a plant is the gardener or the farmer's shadow. And so if that material is super far away from the site, we're going to find problems going long term. And so the design that I'm just developing now, it's a long, thin site. It's about, I don't know, 150, 175 feet wide, and then goes on for a good mile, and has a full roof that comes off of it, so to speak, from the rock to the west of it. But one of the things is my clients don't have a lot of time. They're both active in their work. They really like the idea of a farm, but until they have the maintenance ability, they won't be able to move forward. And so what we're doing is we're taking the front field, and it will be like their site in miniature. So on the left-hand side, they're going to have their quick come again crops. They're going to have their lettuces, their brassicas. Then it's going to move into root crops. Then it's going to go into shrubs and small trees, larger trees. And this will be like the entire site in this small field. So that way, when they do decide to put in the orchard or the nut orchard, they have key specimens of this right out front their front door. So that way they have visuals on it. So then when the apples are blooming, they're like, oh, interesting, the apples are blooming. And then they can walk back and see it. So this is a way to indicate what's going on in the rest of the field. So zones are interesting because we can also have indicators or conversations that showcase that. Noah, does that answer your questions?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, cool. Awesome. So 2 questions from this individual. Oh, Diremark. Who's Diremark? Oh, they didn't give me access. Anyways, whoever Diremark is, I can't seem to remove the yellow highlights in the top of my slides. What feature does this? How to edit the master slide and put your name in the portfolio. So yeah, slide 1, tutorial 5, how to edit the master slide right there. Goes into very specific detail.
Yes, so Javan, thank you for that. I am Diamond.
Okay.
So
hey, Lance.
I didn't realize you couldn't access the link, so we have to go back and get that done. But yeah, I picked up the video, so I'll read through that or view that later on today. And the other question I had for you was, there are various access points to the materials, and sometimes the assignments appear to be different depending on where you access it, which is the definitive source for the assignments that you like us to use.
Yeah, great question, Lance, and thanks for that. As we've brought online the template, the written assignment rubric has been superseded. So the OSU PDC Pro template is the definitive one. And over the next little while, we're going to be phasing out those written instructions entirely and opting for the template and probably more. So thanks for that. And my apologies. It's when you're switching things over, there's always
Right.
that piece. So thank you.
All right, thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
And you mentioned the toilet, right? That you started out by discussing the composting toilet. We are actually looking to install toilets next week on one of our farms in Jamaica. How accessible is the whole idea of a composting toilet, and how does it really diverge from or differ from traditional toilets? So just to give you an idea what we're looking to do, right? We would be using like steel drums, and we put the drums into the earth. We put the regular flushing toilet on top of that. Goes down about, let's say, about 8, somewhere around 15 feet deep into the earth. And then that's about it. We have rainwater harvesting, and then we flush as we normally do in a home setting. And the idea is that once it goes down to 15 feet, the load then starts to dissipate, right? What should we be thinking about differently at this stage?
Yeah, I think you asked these questions a couple of office hours ago, and I went into it in depth. But when you're looking at composting toilets are composting toilets because we're usually using that material in some way, shape, or form. So 15 feet down is going to be problematic in terms of adding in the deposit from the person and adding in the carbon to offset that. So that way it does decompose. Not to mention, it's probably not going to get the air, and it's probably going to get over moistured.
Right.
As well, if you just have a pit toilet, which is what it sounds like, then there is a concentration of feces and urine in a centralized location. So there's a couple of options there. You can work with what's called a drop toilet, which I talked about during that conversation, which we installed in Kenya, which is basically it's a raised platform that has 2 or 3 stalls, and those stalls then have encased. We usually use bricks or cinder blocks and cemented in areas that then could have the material drop down into it and then have the flushing, so to speak. So basically, whenever you make your deposit, you're flushing with carbon material, so slightly moist carbon materials. So in Jamaica, things like bagasse might be an opportunity. The off work of cane and sugar and rum
Right.
creation. That's been used a number of times in sort of the Central America, Caribbean tropics, where you
Right.
add that in, and that usually creates a really nice material because it gets hot quite quickly. So
Right.
usually that will come down, and then basically when that's filled, so when that vessel or that stall is filled, you basically throw a board over that hole and then you move to the next hole. And so you kind of have a revolving conversations. Usually it's 3 or 5, and then there's 2 or 3 that are always active and 1 or 2 that are always decomposing and moving through. And then you treat it the same way you do any compost. After its thermophilic phase, which means it goes through a year of getting really hot, and this is static hot, so we're not turning it at this point. We don't do a lot of turning when it comes to human manure composting. But
Right.
after that point, what we'll do is we'll take the outside and turn it into the inside, and the inside will become the outside. So we take off all the outside material, put it aside. That inside material will then become the outside, and then it'll have what's called the mesophilic stage for a second year. So usually 2 years of decomposition. At that point, that material is then useful for application onto woody deciduous only. So we don't put that onto our veggie garden, our leaf garden, anything where that material could basically touch. Now, usually, if you've done it properly, there's no problem. But this is our last safeguard against any sort of pathogen transmission, or if the people using it are high in any sort of pharmaceuticals or over caffeinated. This is very true. A lot of the human manure can be high in caffeine, which is really interesting because caffeine is a biocide for a lot of microorganisms. So it's one of those things that over those 2-year period, the thermophilic, the bacterial stage, the mesophilic, the fungal stage will help those materials to decompose. Now, if you want to use your steel drums and you'd rather not do permanent receptacles, you can use steel drums and basically have that material in it, and then make sure that ratio is correct in terms of carbon, and then seal it up, put it off to the side, leave it for 2 years, don't think about it. I'd probably leave it for 3 years and then bring them back into rotation after that point. I probably wouldn't put them in direct sun. I'd probably put them in dappled shade under a tree, or that's the maturing casts of the human manure. As a lot of folks who do human manure, they tend to have areas that these places are in, and places where kids and animals can't get into it. So if it were I probably wouldn't do a borehole. You're losing all that material. You're losing that fertility. It's a great opportunity to harvest that material and then turn it into fertility, but it does take work and management. So those are kind of the trade-offs.
Thank you so much for that. Thank you so much for that. Appreciate it.
Yeah, you're most welcome. Most welcome. Okay, we're at the end. So let's go through, unless there's any other questions. Anybody have a follow-up question or thought, conversation, anything like that they want to add in there? No, bobbleheads going this way, not bobbleheads going this way. Got it. All right. So let's go into this week's assignments. So we did sector, now we're into micro. Okay, cool. I'm just going to close out a couple of tools here because they're in my way. So microclimates is one of the first overlays that we're going to be looking at that is interactive in both the biotic and the abiotic factors. So this brings us into what are we taking a look under 3 specificities, which is how much sun is there, how much heat is there, and how much wetness is there. What is the moisture levels? And so normally I'm looking for a quality of all of those 3 onto our conversation here. So when we take a look at some of these, Adria's cool shaded cool shaded pockets, dry barren soil, cool windy shaded, moist mostly shaded cool. And this is a great example to go off of because Adria really took a look at these different elements and understood these. And it's great because when you get these little pockets of these full sun, it immediately starts to tell you, okay, if I'm going for full-time production, this is generally going to be what I'm looking at. If we're looking at a dry area, an area where the roots can be dry, we're probably looking more into our fruits. So all of these different areas will have specificity on how we're working, what's specific to these areas. And this takes a lot of site analysis. It takes walking the site, experience the site, being with the site. Some of this may be that very scientific word guessing, also called interpolating. We're just guessing what we think these might be, and over time we develop a better understanding of the site. From there, we're going to get at least one plant that is in each of these areas. So we want to get a sense of what are the different plants that we're finding here, and what does that then say about these different areas? So this is our first design conversation of putting together, okay, interesting, we're having a microclimate, but we're also seeing these specific types of plants here. So we can start to make some rough assumptions starting off. Again, you don't have to use this format. You can use an open format like Lauren did, or you can use the same format as Adria did. Really work it in such a way that it works for you, but generally keep it all in one slide. This one definitely doesn't need to be 2 slides. Then we're getting into plant identification. So we're getting into the scientific name. Why do we ask you about the scientific name? Because as you start to cross borders and cross languages, the scientific name is the scientific name. And what's wonderful about that is that we can have common language to converse about these different plants. We're going to talk about the form. So is it a shrub, a grass, a tree, a forb, herbaceous? We're going to talk about the native preferred habitat, the microclimate. So now we're getting into the description of that microclimate, and you may even have a microclimate within a microclimate. It may be very specific to that site. I'm finding it in a hole in the moist places that I'm seeing here. Now, one of the things that that folks have brought up, and I appreciate it, we've been a little bio-specific or bio-bigoted. We haven't included fungi in here, and I completely agree. If you have fungi on the site and you want to identify the fungi, please do. So that still has to be augmented. Couple of extra things here. What are the uses? So are there any uses of this plant, any functionality? And then what's the ecological function that this plant plays within this ecology? So we're now starting to think more and more, what is the function of this plant? Years ago, my mentor and now close colleague, Brandon Bauer, we had this wonderful evening talk called the Invasives Talk. And after that talk, it was a wonderful story about people being nomadic and planting trees and planting fruits, because we've always had a streak for agriculture within us. You know, if we had an amazing fruit, we would plant it off to the side, or the kids or we would in our own human year deposits. But what was fascinating is I came to the conclusion at the end of that weeds is just plant racism. When we say weed, it's just racist. It's nothing to do with the plant. It's just something we don't like about the plant. And it's really easy to be at war with plants. Go outside and don't like one, and all of a sudden you're at war for the rest of your life. So really what we're trying to grab at, especially in permaculture, is what is the functionality of this plant? What role does it play? What ecological niche does it hold? How does it help the rest of the community? Because the ecological element that is in service to the most number of other ecological elements has the highest chance of survival. This is how we get to evolution. And this is how we understand these processes going through. I just saw a question here from Karen. How do you select which 5 plants? Totally up to you. If you have a plant that you've never seen before and you're interested about, if you see one that you know and you want it to be easy, totally up to you. You can choose whatever you like in those sections.
Okay. I mean, specifically, I think I was curious about, I mean, I've got our native plants or
native introduced,
not native.
totally
Doesn't
up to
matter.
you. Totally up to you. You know, if it were I would be putting in a number of different elements and really understanding this site from top to bottom, but that's okay. Like this is the beginning. So if you want to go with native and start to understand that biological community, that's fine. If you want to start to get a sense of, okay, what are some of the advantageous plants that have come into this biome, that's okay too.
Okay. I mean, I've got a lot of plants on my site, and I it's my intention to do this for all of the plants. I mean, I kind of know them, but it's too much to do for this assignment.
Totally. Totally. Yeah. Yeah. I would say wherever you're feeling deficient in the design aspect. So if you're thinking, I'm not really totally aware of the natives on this site, I would lean
Exactly.
towards the natives. Yeah. So just,
Okay.
go for the weak link.
Okay. Can I ask another question
Please.
too? It was about the moisture on the site.
Yeah.
What if your site is really rainy half the year and bone dry the other half?
Yeah. So a lot of people will create seasonal microclimates and seasonal zones. So
Okay.
a lot of folks will do a summer winter zone plan, and then they'll do a summer winter climate. Or if you're in like some of the wet dry tropics or some of the moderate tropics, then you'll have these different microclimates. So yeah, absolutely. If you're feeling like there's a summer microclimate and a winter, feel free to do both, or to specify, yeah, this is the summer climate and I'd like to do the winter climate, but I don't have the time. So I'm going to do that later on. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Great questions. And this is a great reminder for everybody. If there's something you want to do or something that you can't find on the site, but it's in the rubric, make a note of it. Because I'm gonna point it out and say, where is this? What's this going on? So you can get away with anything if you show your work and just showing me what's there or what's not. Microclimate attributes. So what are the attributes of the microclimate? And we've had some great designs that have come out of the microclimate attributes that have started to show the sampling of existing species within those microclimates as well. So this is not specific to those microclimates, but folks have started to do that. And that's a wonderful way to go about this assignment. SWOT analysis. So looking through the lens of microclimates, what are the strengths of your site? What are the weaknesses of your microclimates? What are the opportunities within your microclimates? What are the threats within your microclimates? I think folks are getting either a little complacent or a little confused, but that SWOT analysis is about the lens of that assignment. So make sure to go through that. I don't know what I was reading last time, but I think it was Sector Compass, and somebody put soil as a weakness. It's like, if you don't talk about soil in the assignment, it's not in the SWOT. So it's really specific to that. Zones. So there's lots of good content about zones in the course, but again, zones are a way of taking a look at the center of human initiative. And sometimes that's where you park the car. Sometimes that's where the woodshed is. Sometimes that's where the house is. Depends on each site. Some sites are totally community oriented and some aren't. So it's where you start from there, and from there moving outwards. Not all sites have all zones, and zones are almost never concentric. For some reason, there's been some images on the internet about concentric zones, and people got it into their mind that was the case. So this is a great example of zonation, very close around the house. One of my feedbacks to Adria was, your zone should cover the entire site. There should be no white space. So Z Lee did a great job here. There is zero white space. We really want to get a sense of what's all on this space. Again, Lauren did a wonderful job here. So definitely make sure the whole site is encompassed. And if you do need to make a bigger site of that, that's fine. Footpaths usually dictate how much and where we're walking and moving on site. So take a look at those footpaths, make sure to put on traffic. And this should match up with the two. And then the narrative of each of these zones is generally what goes on in those areas. So for Adria, lots of zone 5, generally untouched, area currently inaccessible due to steep slopes, boulder pyres, down trees, overgrown thorny vines. So a big conversation there was to come in and start to make trails that she could walk on a daily basis. Again, this is a way of taking a look at a site and starting to say, okay, what's the design imperative here? What are we going to be working on here? What else about zones? If you do want to put in zone 0 to put in the house, that's totally fine, or put in the area of the house, that's totally fine. And again, this is existing current zones. Again, SWOT analysis. So if you put as a weakness, there's only zone 5, that doesn't really tell me much. Why is only having zone 5 a weakness? The ecology that's there is totally fine with it. So what is it in the human mind that's making you go, that's a problem? You need to explain yourselves a little bit more. I don't know what's inside your head, so you need to tell me why you think it's a weakness. This is a way for us to interact and communicate, and for me to understand your designer's mind and start to take a look at it. Opportunities, especially as we come into zones, there's a great opportunity to take a look and say, well, you know, a lot of this is not being utilized, and it's directly where people are coming in and out of the house. I think there's an opportunity here to either beautify this area, create more aesthetics. One of the things in temperate climes that I really like putting is ribes or clove currant right outside the front door. One of the most beautiful smells, cinnamon smells, stays ripe on the bush and on the berry for up to a month, and has some wonderful foliage. It's a wonderful thing to do in temperate zones. So really think about those different zones, those different areas, and where people are walking back and forth. Again, Larry Santoyo-ism, the best place in car culture is for the lettuce patches to put it in between the car door and the house door, as long as the exhaust doesn't cross the lettuce. So this is always about putting things where we're going to see them and connect with them. Again, that's SWOT analysis specifically to the zones. Questions about microclimates or zones? Okay. Questions about anything under the sun? Anything to do with the course? Anything to do with assignments, research, little rabbit holes you found yourself diving down into? Technology?
I'll ask a question. Do you have any recommendations? Because I know you've talked about like learning plant identification just for, and like the website, like the plant identification one with all the mutual beneficial relationships. Are there any more books out there that we can get that you would recommend?
Great question. And
And
I
can you
think
put-
it's actually on this list because I think I just copied the list from.
Oh, it's somewhere already? Yeah, wherever it is, I'd like to be pointed to that.
Okay, I'm going to put it up at the top here. So it's called Botany in a Day by Thomas Elpel. I'm just going to grab it off the shelf. So Thomas is an exceptional fellow. He's down in Montana. And this book, Botany in a Day, the Patterns Method for Plant Identification, walks you through starting to understand the pattern language of plants. So this book was pivotal for my education for plant ID. And then when I had a series of concussions and had to rebuild a lot of my short, medium, and long-term memory, was brilliant to come back to and to start to understand plants again. What I love about Thomas's books, and he's got a series of them, is that he developed these books for himself. And so whenever he's on a new site, he develops a full compendium of plants on that site that he's building for himself. It's his understanding of looking at these plants, understanding these plants, doing press patterns and presses of leaves and flowers, and identification of when he found them and where he was seeing them and what he was doing with them. And it's just such a brilliant book because he's working with the general flowers and their orders. So, you know, this is a great one. This is the mallow subclass. There we go. The mallow subclass, and he's done these beautiful drawings, and he's showing all the different patterns that he's seeing within these plants, and then specific information about them below. So I really like this book. I think you can buy it on Amazon. I'll find a link for everyone and put it into the show notes eventually. He has great understanding about learning and understanding leaf types and what's pinnate and what's prostrate and what's alternating and what's variegated. These are the words that you're going to find in every single dichotomous key. So it's a nice understanding that if you pull this book out every day, Botany in a Day, and start to use the key and start to understand, go through the little quizzes and tutorials he has. Phenomenal book and great question. So Botany in a Day has been one of my favorite books for learning botany, and it's one of those books that I carry with me wherever I go, either in its full hard copy or in its digital format as well. I've become very enamorous of digital books on a e-ink screen because you can make notes and whatnot, and you can hold those notes across multiple digital platforms. But I still have a ton of books and a lot of post-it notes. So great question, Noah. Really appreciate that. Any other questions? Anything under the sun, folks?
Yeah, so I've been working on creating a little plant database using the Anki cards.
Mm-hmm.
But when I'm looking at plants, I often get different people say different things. This is for full sun. This is for sun and shade. This is for, and I realize that it's regional. I get that. So, I'm looking in my region, but still getting a wide variety of results.
Yeah. So I'm going to bring up another mentor of mine, Richard Walker, who created in the late 80s, he created a 3-acre food forest that was everything that every book has ever talked about. And one of the things that he said, and continues to say to me, is that there's an order of magnitude for information. And the highest grade of information you can have is what you've experienced yourself. It's it's the highest grade. I've done that. I know that. I understand that. The second is somebody trusted who you trust and is in your area. So it's one thing for somebody that you trust to say something and they don't live in your area and they've never lived in your area and they're saying, well, this will work there. And it's another to have somebody close that works there. And this is where I think there can be a little high and mightiness that comes off of permaculture, especially people who've taken it, and they'll go and they'll tell farmers who've been farming for 30 years, you don't know what you're doing, which is a terrible thing to do. And no one should ever do. No one should ever go to a grower, a producer, a farmer, a rancher and say, oh, you don't really know what you're doing. These are individuals who know their site, and especially when I'm moving into a new site. So I moved into this area full-time coming up 3 years ago, part-time about 5 years ago. And I made friends with all the farmers and just asked them questions and brought them food and brought them seeds and made good relationships with them and treated them like people and was like, so what are you guys doing with your garlic? And that question, or like, I'm having problems, what are you doing? Almost always elicits just a cornucopia of information. Just like, well, we've done this, we've done this, we've done this. We haven't really quite figured. This is the great thing about farmers. They'll never tell you they figured it out. And truthfully, anybody who's been growing for long-term will never say, I know this, forever and ever. We've had locust for 2 years now. Last year, the locust took out 80% of my garden. This year, it's probably close to 20 or 30%. And we're all just sharing. We're just sharing what we know and sharing what we're working with. Last year, I designed a poultry moat, so like a little chicken run that ran around the garden. Folks have been putting that in on their sites. I didn't get a chance to do it this year. It's been working really well. It's been keeping the pressure of the locust down, hasn't allowed them to breed as quickly, smoking them out with bee smokers to move them into that chicken run. So basically you're taking the problem of locusts and turning it into chicken and eggs. Awesome. So yeah, that second piece is people you trust. The third is what you read in books or online.
Okay.
So yeah, there's going to be people all over the map. What was the one that I read recently that I thought was kind of humorous? Oh yeah, the old blueberries only like alkaline. It's like, or acidic, whatever it is. It's so not a thing in my mind anymore. I don't even remember which one it's supposed to be. I've had them in both, and they've thrived in both. So much of that has to do with the biology that's within the soil. And this is another reason why I don't care about pH. You can test pH in the same place throughout the day, and you can have a reading difference of up to 2 points every day, because plants manage pH on a second by second, sometimes millisecond by millisecond basis. And they attract through exudates all the different elements that are coming towards them with the soil food web. And that pH can change. Now, if you took that pH in the same spot at the same time in the same season, year after year, okay, now we have something that's actually stabilized in terms of variables. But in terms of taking pH and being like, I have to add dolomitic lime, which is one of the worst things we can do to our soils because it throws off the calcium magnesium balance, and then you have chemically compacted soil as opposed to mechanically compacted soil. There's a lot of bunk information about that. So yeah, it's interesting because everyone has their own conversation. So I think I said this in the very first tutorial. We start with digital information, we start with other people's books, and then we move into ground truthing all information.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
Thanks,
great
that's
question.
helpful.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially if you've never done it before, like I didn't. I had never grown a thing before I got into this work. And
Wow.
I'd only ever had a little bit of working knowledge in terms of flora and fauna because I was in scouts for years. But it was very working. Like as a young boy, I knew which burnt quicker. Like that was my level of understanding. So I came in very, very nascent, and it's taken me a long time to learn. And because of the concussions, I've had to relearn a couple of times. So I feel like I've got some quicker guides and some quicker ways to go there. But truthfully, creating relationships with plants, this is something else that Brandon taught me. Pick a plant this year to create a relationship with and date. So I dated Spilanthes close to 11 years ago, and it's been the love affair of my life. It's been one of my favorite plants. I've loved growing it. It's one of the most medicinal plants for oral health. It has amazing antiviral effects. It feels like a 9-volt battery in your mouth. And so if you ever wanted a party favor to watch a whole bunch of people have a reaction, it's fun. But that's one of those plants that I started to date it early on. And then I started to work with other plants. And then I started to work with other plants and grow my knowledge incrementally. And because I also work in life design, and folks will come to me for decision making, for emotional conversations, one of the things I've learned, because some folks come to me and they want to build patterns and habits, is keep the bar laughably low.
Mm-hmm.
So whatever it is you're learning, keep that bar laughably low. So what I do is I learn one new plant a year still. I only go for one new plant. And in that plant, I learned to create a relationship with it, to learn from it, to work with it. This year was juniper. I knew about juniper. I know the traits of juniper. I have them memorized, but I never really observed it for a year. So this year, this was the year that I went and had a relationship with juniper. I went and I watched and I looked. I looked at the insects that loved it, the insects that hated it. I looked at generally where it was growing as understory, usually in shade, not very much in direct sunlight. In my area, juniper doesn't get much bigger than a couple of feet. In my friend's area, juniper's a tree. So, there's all of these fascinating ways of being with plants. But if we think we have to learn my level of knowledge tomorrow, or for me, my mentor's level of knowledge tomorrow, you will go crazy and you'll stop before you start. So, you only have to lift the anchor a little bit off the ocean floor to move forward. You don't have to put it in the boat. So it's learning a little bit, moving a little bit, learning a little bit, moving a little bit, usually relearning something because you thought it was true, but then you're seeing it in a different context. And then you have to think it through and be like, oh, I'm seeing it like this. This makes sense. So it just takes time. And what I can say is be gentle on yourself. That you'll learn it quicker if you're gentle on yourself. And if you want fun ways to learn, and I don't know if this is the case, but there's a black gentleman who I think is Jamaican, and he raps about different vegetables. And so when I was teaching in person, we'd play it. Take a look at the cucumber rap. I learned things about cucumber I never knew. And I used to teach this way because I used to work with Alberta Parks, and we would create these 1-hour nature themed musicals where I would dress up in costume and I would dance and sing in front of campers. I did this for about 5 years in Kananaskis country, just west of Calgary. And Alberta actually has this entire program. And so my very first show I wrote and sung and played was called Law and Order Fungal Intent. And so I got to dance and sing about mushrooms and tell people mycelium. And what's amazing about that story is I have people still to this day that will tell me things that they learned during the show because it was sung, or because it was an interesting character, or I did this thing where I was a saprophytic mushroom. So saprophytes are decomposers. They eat the dead. And as Paul Stamets liked to say, if we didn't have saprophytes, we would be kilometers deep in detritus. So if we didn't have this fungi explosion during, I think it was the Permian extinction, we wouldn't have all this. So I have to explain to a group of kids how mushrooms digest food from the inside out. And so I've got this hamburger that I'm in an auditorium full of kids. I've got this mycelium that comes out of my hand, and I'm putting it into the hamburger, and I'm going, and all these kids go, oh, I get it. or when we talk about the mycelium being the entire apple tree and the mushroom just being the apple, or more specifically, the spores within it being the seeds. Okay, now we have a mental model we can actually translate into mushrooms or translate into fungi. So however it is you learn is however it is you learn. You don't have to learn from books. I like books. I like repositories. I like picking them up. I like reading them. But if I'm truthful, I learn way better if somebody's singing to me or dancing to me or, doing all of these things. So the radical mycology convergence created by Peter McCoy and his collaboration, they put out a mixtape and everyone submits fungal songs, which is super fun. So there's all these different ways to learn. And I would just say, play with it, be open to it. Don't make it a big frustrating thing or it'll become a big frustrating thing. Just find ways to keep it light and fun.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, you're so welcome. You're so welcome. All right, final questions. Comments, queries, quotations. Okay, awesome. Well, folks, been super fun. Good conversations all. If you have questions, if you're suffering with something or if you're having problems with something, reach out direct, javan@allpointsdesign.ca. We'll set up a Zoom. We'll have a quick, anywhere from 10 to 30. I can usually solve anything within a short amount of time. You don't have to suffer. I saw a question about time management, so I wanted to address that as my final conversation. So generally, if I'm learning something and I'm just in a course now, what I'll do is I'll set aside time every day to keep it alive. And that's between 5 to 20 minutes. Basically, I have to open it. I have to look at something. I have to read something, or I have to do something once a day. I want to keep it alive. The reason for this is, I don't know about you, but if I put something away in a box, I can make up a story in my head that I'm further along than I am. And then I go back to the box. I'm like, oh man, I don't have the time to finish this. So I like to keep things alive on a daily basis. Then twice a week, I will give a longer block of deep work time. If you're not familiar with deep work, Cal Newport's book is a great example of it. You don't have to read the whole book. You can just read a summary, but basically leave a block of time that is distraction free. That means you tell your family, your friends, you turn off your phone, you turn off your computer notifications, whatever, and you're just there to play with the material. So the first time in the week, it's just play. It's the hit and run of me putting in all the things that I think that are important or that are easy. And then during that time, I make a list of all the hard things that I need to research or work on. But basically, I like the idea of what's called a snowball approach to completion. As I was training to become a financial advisor years ago, and we did this for debt reduction. Snowball meant that you took the thing that was the easiest, not the thing that was the hardest, because success can motivate more than completing something completely hard. This goes in the face of a lot of advice out there. If it doesn't work for you, throw it out. Doesn't matter. I'm just telling you what works for me. So I take whatever's easy and I get it down on the page. And by the end of it, I feel like I've done something. Then I also have a list of things I have to research or work on. And now my 20 minutes or my 50 minutes or whatever, 30 minutes, 5 minutes for the next couple of days is slotted to research and gather material. And then the second time that I have deep work, 2-3 hours, I know exactly what I'm doing. So 30 minutes a day, something like that. Just touch it, keep it alive, look at it, remind yourself, great. Halfway through the week, I usually put it on like a Wednesday or a Tuesday. I'll go into the material, I'll go deep dive, kind of look through it, do all the things I think I can do. So yeah, I can do that. I can do that. I get lost in a rabbit hole once in a while, bring myself back. Great. That gives me a sense of what do I need to do? What are the hard things I need to do? And then I continue on with the 5 to 30 every day. And then I come back to another deep work session, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, something like that, 3 hours. And then I go deep dive and I complete what I need to complete. That's normally what I do if I'm in a course. I try to keep it alive that way. Second thing I do, I reach out and I get an accountability partner every course I'm in. Doesn't matter if the course themselves have set it up. I'll always reach out to somebody and say, hey, do you want to be an accountability partner? Let's meet halfway in between when things are due. Let's keep each other accountable. Let's ask questions of each other. Phenomenal. I wish I had done this years ago when I was in university. I think I was probably too petrified to ask anybody if they wanted to study together. But yeah, I do this all the time now. And in online courses, it's really easy because they'll usually give you the list, or in this course, you know everybody, right? So it's easy to reach out to somebody who you like their work or you like what they're doing. You're not even halfway through the course. it's totally permissible to reach out and be like, hey, do you want to be accountability buddies and connect and do this work together? And what's great about that is some of the accountability partners I've had, especially in courses like regenerative living, regenerative design, permaculture, are friends and colleagues to this day. So they're people that I still connect with. And so creating ecological connections is what we do on land, but it's also what we do with people. And I'll say that I've been most blessed in my life because I've probably reached out more than my colleagues have. I've reached out and I've created more connections and conversations to the point to where with regenerative living, the online educational institute I'm developing, I'm reaching out to friends. I'm reaching out to people I have relationships with. I'm cold calling very few people. And those that I am cold calling are saying, I know you. I've heard about you. So-and-so knows you. And they speak really highly of you. So, creating those connections, creating those conversations is really important. We gild as people as much as we gild in the landscape. So I would say that would be the other thing I would recommend. And then don't worry about making everything look perfect. Don't worry about the renders being perfect. You don't have to sit there cursing the mouse and cursing the computer if you can pull out a piece of paper, draw a bunch of circles, and explain it. So if you are finding that the digital aspect of this course is taking up too much time, drop down to drawing, drop down to pencil, paper, transparency paper. It's fine as long as it's legible. If you take your photos in bright light or get them scanned, it's no problem. And the great thing about that is you can take little screenshots of your little images and just put them as your legend. It's super easy. It's just like little screenshot of the tree. That's that one. Little screenshot of this, pencil color in. Yeah, that's grass. That goes there. And then it's totally relatable as well. So now the legend and what's on that map is completely 100% relatable. And that's important. So a lot of people will do a drawn design and then try to make it work digitally. And it's hard because the reader no longer has the legibility to decipher your map. So anyways, try and make it as easy as possible. Try not to add any extra work. Don't learn a new computer program. I said this in my tutorials. I say this in the first one. A lot of people do. It's not worth it. But just have fun, play with it, and you'll find that it becomes a little bit easier. All right, folks, final question.
Before you run off, sorry, I got derailed. I got called from the job. I'm just getting off it. You say have fun. For me, it's not fun because I really have a 70-acre farm that I really need to turn into a business, right? So, yeah, we can have fun doing it, but at the end of the day, it's truly, truly a business. It's not like around the home. It's something that we want to develop into a profitable ecotourism kind of site and an active farm. But I feel that at this point, given that I work full-time elsewhere, it's difficult to dedicate that, the amount of hours to get it done, especially again, I'm remote, absentee farmer, right? Do we, you speak about like people going to Cuba, for example, and you have a team going to Cuba. Are there folks who are interested in maybe coming down to Jamaica for a couple of months to, tackle this kind of project with us?
Oh yeah.
And how do we access those individuals?
Yeah. So there's people who are looking for experience everywhere. And this is one of the major questions out of a course like this is, where do I go to get experience?
Yeah.
And when I started, it was volunteer, right? It was volunteer or showing up to somebody with value. And we can have that conversation a little later on. But I think for you, once you get a sense of what the offer is, so this is the design, this is what we're doing, this is what the week will look like, here's what the exchange is. So we're providing food, but we're looking for people to do this work. We're providing a place to pitch a tent, or we actually have housing, whatever that might be. And then the places in which you can distribute that are varied. So willing workers on organic farms, woofers, is probably the most established way to do it. Willing workers on organic farms, that's a place where you can say, this is the offer. This is a list that goes out internationally. You get folks who are traveling, they want a change of pace. You've got kids on gap year between high school and university, and you can get people who are cycling through. The second is HelpX. HelpX is more specific to, I'm doing this site and I'm looking for specifically this. And it tends to be more focused and project-based. And then the last is, there are so many places that you can list an opportunity for permaculture. So if you haven't checked out permacultureglobal.org, it was Jeff Lawton's attempt at creating a social network for permaculturalists. I think some folks are really active on it. After I made my profile, I haven't been on it since. I just not another social media I need to be connected with. But a lot of new people, and especially people out of Jeff's courses, are on there. And so they tend to be looking for experiences. There's tons of Facebook groups about permaculture. And if you take a look at the regenerative agriculture group, I think it's the largest with 32,000. And then there's Permaculture America, Permaculture Canada. There's all of these groups. And so what I did years ago is I started to categorize and look at them, because I do a lot of advertising for courses. You're doing advertising for opportunities. So there's an opportunity there to post on those sites once you have a centralized event on Facebook or centralized event on your web page that says, this is what we're doing, this is how it's working. And then basically saying, okay, we're going to have a campaign to build up the people power we need for this, to invite people down to have this experience. And the more local you can make it, the more we're going to give you a sense of Jamaica. We're going to give you a sense of the place. We're going to show you around. We're going to have that sort of that cultural experience. I find the more interest you get from folks. And that's been my experience as I've been helping folks out of, I was working with a lady who was out of Spain doing agroforestry, and we had almost exactly the same conversation. And once she finally put together that offer, she found that people were rolling in because they knew about it. They could see it. It takes time to maintain because you have to keep those things active and alive. But at the same time, if you put something together, I'd be happy to put it out to my list and let them know. And most people are, because they're looking for content to send to their mailing list to say, hey, I know this individual. He was a student in my class. I've looked at it. I can say this will be great. Definitely check it out. So get an idea about what it is you're doing, put it into it, and play it out. And then I just want to address the thing about fun. Most of the work I've done has been business oriented. Most of the designs I work are income generating. Most of the work I do has a level of seriousness on it that a client looks like they're going to have an ulcer about, because they're talking about it. What I can say is this: the lighter I hold the project, the better the project becomes. So when I hold something light, I have all of my faculties to work with. I have all the parts of me. I've got the pusher who wants to get it done, but I've also got the dreamer who's looking at it and kind of going, what am I not seeing here? So part of this, and I like this about permaculture, because permaculture is a design approach that can be applied to anything. And so one of my specialities is I've applied permaculture to lives and myself. So the more I have access to all of me, the dreamer, the pusher, the judge, the jury, the playful one that looks at a site as about 3 feet tall, as if I'm 5 years old, going like, this is really cool, and finds little niches and places that I like to be in, the more fully I can bring my entire brain to a site. And that doesn't mean that the final pass isn't the professional. Sure, the professional looks over every single design, looks every T is crossed, every I is dotted, catches grammar, catches design aspects that I was confused about. Absolutely. But especially in generation, especially in this playfulness that we see in evolution, where there's experiments, like you take a look at 4.5 billion years of R&D on this planet, and there have been so many experiments that didn't work. Now we might classify that as, well, that was death. True enough, but so is an experiment that we fly. So I tend to think about design and definitely business as a series of experiments at the same level as like making a paper airplane, flying it, seeing if it works, and then trying it again. That way I keep the fear, the frustration, and the potential issue with failure as low as possible, so that way I can get on the horse again. Because if it gets too big and I fail, I don't want to try it again, ever. And that happens with a lot of people. I deal with a lot of my colleagues who are burnt out, who took on a big project and it failed, and they wrap themselves up with the identity of that so much that they're just toast. They're toast for a couple of years. And so we end up a lot of chatting about it. So that's what I mean by saying keeping things light instead of playing with it. Sure, let the businessman in you have final say in the professional, but keep it light so you can be open to opportunities.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you so much for that.
You're welcome.
And Adam, I know you're excited. I know your excitement.
Yeah, if you ever want to start a conversation, I would love to have an excuse to take a trip down to Jamaica.
There we go.
Okay, we'll look into that. All right.
There we go.
All right. Cool,
It starts,
cool.
Lance. You don't have
Right.
to say much to get people to come to a tropical place to do something.
In winter, right? In winter. Yeah, definitely.
We're gonna do it
Especially
in about January, February. Okay.
All right. Yeah, definitely. We'll try to put that together.
Cool,
All
man.
right.
Thanks,
Cool.
everybody.
Thanks so much. Thanks so much.
You're
Guys.
welcome.
Have a good
See you in
one.
the next one. Take care.
Okay. Bye-bye.
You. Bye. Bye.